Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 6 of a Instagram Live series we're calling Everything You Were Afraid to Ask About Surrogacy. Just going to invite in my collaborator here, Jenn White of Bright Futures Families. Should be able to join now. Did this work? It worked.
Yay! We got it 6 times in. We can do it.
I was gonna say 6 for 6, pretty good for somebody who really, doesn't understand this stuff.
I definitely had some fear. I got a new phone last week. I'm like, oh God, do I have all of the passwords incorrectly? All of the panic moments, right?
What if it doesn't work this time?
Right?
Well, hopefully, I've taken the first one for the team by having my phone die completely at the very end of one of ours. So
It's fine. It's fine.
Okay, so tonight we have the provocative topic
I was
of,
like, it's the word that's provocative, right?
I know, deserve. That was where I was going to
Serve.
start. Okay, so it's
Uh-huh.
breaking down compensation, getting GCs, surrogates, what they deserve. And I was going to say the very first thing I was going to say is that I don't feel like I should just speak for myself. I don't think I'm in a position to define what is deserved
And
here.
I mean, I was my lead was gonna be like, they deserve like the world, everything, right?
Right.
What they're doing is priceless.
Yes.
I think, and to me, it's more the like, there are so many things where there's misunderstandings or too much, and I'm gonna say over kindness, like as in like people are not willing to be, as my team and our favorite thing to say is, clear as kind. They're not willing
Yep.
to be clear enough to be kind to stop some of the breakdowns later that can happen. And I mean, because a lot of it is a contract, and by the time you get that far, it's really hard to undo misunderstandings without causing more difficulties. I mean, I made a whole list, so I was like, I know you made a list last week. I made a
Oh,
list.
also got a list, but I would love nothing more than to follow your lead here
Okay.
and start where you want to start. And then, if there's anything I feel like you've missed, I've got my list as backup, but
Okay. All right.
go
Well,
for it.
here's my big four. I'm gonna go with four. I look at my list over my shoulder here, right?
Okay.
Okay. So travel, lost
Mm-hmm.
wages,
Mm-hmm.
and both the gestational carrier and the spouse, childcare, and a too many rose colored glasses. Like as in assuming nothing could ever go wrong. And so therefore just being like, no, we won't put that in there because nothing could go wrong. And then when things do, suddenly there's a big regret. So those are
Mm-hmm.
my four giant ones that often we see cause major friction for people.
I was just going to ask you to define the list. That you're saying these are financial things that end up being sticking points during a journey.
Yes. Yeah. And that cause like that make people feel like gestational carriers, especially like that they're not getting what they deserve, right? Like, so to use our provocative word, right? Like that.
Yeah.
So let's say like, okay, let's talk about lost wages, right? Like we just go with one of them just to start. That,
Yeah.
okay, like, did you define it clearly? Like, and so like suddenly something happens and you don't, one, either your wages changed in that time frame. Two,
Mm-hmm.
what if you started as a stay-at-home parent and you went, oh no, I don't plan to work. Something changes, you do.
Yep.
You didn't account for, you work night shift, you get a differential or you get bonuses or had a promotion, something changes. Any of those things. And the other one, my favorite and the worst one I will say is teachers. And we love teachers, but their pay is a nightmare to figure out for lost wages, especially depending on what time of year you deliver, things like that, right? So all of these things really cause hurt feelings is what it really comes down to. It's not that I think either side is trying to withhold from somebody or say, hey, no, this is horrible, we don't want to pay you. Usually it's just that it wasn't clearly defined well enough.
Yeah, and I feel like both sides just want guidance, right? They want to know, like, what are the rules of the road here?
Yep.
What is typical? What is atypical? Because there's sensitivities. Like both sides, I think there's a fear of it's like a negative, like a loss-based fear, right? For
Right.
intended parents, it's like, what if our budget blows up?
Right.
Do am I going to feel like I'm being nickeled and dimed through this process?
Right.
Right? And then it starts to feel more transactional. Like you started off with a surrogate that you were like, I know that her motivations are, maybe compensation is helpful, but beyond that, she's committed to us. And that may be exactly the truth and not change. And yet, when you talk about, like, oh, there's another thing that just got deducted from escrow, like it
Right.
starts to feel like there's an endless hand in your pocket. And for surrogates, it's like, okay, well, I took off time and I had to flex hours here to go for this monitoring appointment and then this one. And then like the per diem, like kind of covered what we needed, but now I have this fee and this other thing. And like,
Right.
there's a sort of feeling that like this is really affecting my life.
Mhm.
And there's all sorts of expenses related to it. And am I protected for contingencies and for the things that, none of us expected along the way? And so there's like a sort of anxiety around just am I getting fleeced, right? That happens on both
On both
sides.
sides,
Yep.
exactly, on both sides. And I think that a lot of times people don't realize that both sides are having essentially the same anxiety. They're
Yeah.
just seeing it from a different perspective. I mean, surrogacy, I like to say surrogacy is like death by a thousand paper cuts, right? Like it's a million teeny tiny, for the most part, like charges, and it adds up so fast. But if you're on the side that is putting the money out and you're being told, hey, you should always be made whole for this, and then suddenly you're like, oh wow, I don't feel whole at all as a
Yeah.
result, like that can be horrible. And then on the other side, the parents like, I don't want to have to pay out even more because I've already paid out so much money.
Mhm.
This really hurts.
Yep. 100%. Okay, so we sort of briefly went over your list, but I'm wondering maybe we can take a step back because I think the philosophy of like what is compensation for and what
Mm.
is it not for is something that people that are like looking into this process again, whether it's as a surrogate or intended parent, don't always understand like what is this money changing hands for? How is it structured to sort of further like that end of just the whole philosophy of why we structure things the way we do.
And I think that some of it is people don't understand the difference between compensation, right?
Yeah.
Then, and also things that are reimbursements. And generally, like so lost wages is actually a reimbursement, not a compensation. And I mean, I'm going to stand on my own little private personal soapbox, and you don't have to agree with me. Now there's anybody out there, but like any of these programs that do all in, like pricing for surrogates, like
Yeah.
they're really muddying that, what that is. So which part is the compensation and which part is a reimbursement? And if you're dealing with, and I mean, right now tax laws are uncertain as to how things are, like all that stuff, like how do you differentiate and tell anybody, your accountant, the IRS, any of those things, if you're choosing to file, like which was a reimbursement and which was compensation? And so that really muddies that field. So I think that the way I look at it is anything that a carrier has to pay out, right? Like full out, like so she has to pay. So her wages she doesn't pay out her wages, but that's money that
She
she's
missed
missing
work.
out that
Yep.
yeah, she's not getting.
Or
Or
PTO that she wouldn't otherwise have used.
right. And childcare, housekeeping, medical expenses, any of things that she's paying out and money is coming back to make her whole, that falls under the reimbursement bucket.
Right.
Then there's the big scary, the thing that terrifies people is that big, lost wages thing.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm going to say, I like to throw this out here if there's any parents watching, because this is still the biggest misconception is that people are like, well, I'm like, you don't rock up to the transfer with a briefcase full of cash and just give her all of that money right there, right? It gets paid monthly in installments over the course of her pregnancy.
Yep.
And different attorneys structure it different ways. Some of them call it pre-birth child support. Some of them say it's pain and suffering. But regardless, it is the compensation she is receiving for her time and effort in this. So that is separate. It's not a reimbursement.
Right. And just to be crystal clear, it is not outcome based, and you are not
Correct.
paying for any
Nope.
outcome,
Nope.
including a baby.
Correct.
right? That is why the payments are made over the course of a pregnancy for the, as you said, the time and effort and the disruption to her life and the risks and all sorts of things that you're taking on in the process, and not in any way tied to an outcome.
Correct. Correct. So, and then there's some other things that depending on how people, call them, but like generally, like there's pots of, if some agencies do like pots of money for, like a wellness package or a doula or
Mhm.
things like that, those are going to be reimbursements
Yep.
also, even though they are technically part of a bigger compensation package, but you're being reimbursed for a service that the parents have provided that you can have during
That's
this
right.
this time
At
frame.
at cost, right?
Correct.
If your doula charges you 1,500 and that is being reimbursed.
Right. Right. Okay.
Yes.
So we
So
got
that is
that. We
the
got that straight.
philosophy, and
Yep.
that's why it's structured the way it's structured.
Yep.
And I think it's also, I imagine you're in the position of reminding intended parents this all the time. I try to emphasize this because if the motivation is not there to genuinely help you become a parent, the way it is structured, it is not worth it. Because a surrogate is going through months of screening. She's going to the medical screening. She's spending time meeting with attorneys and psychologists, and she is doing oftentimes intramuscular injections, all to get up to a transfer that may or may not work out.
Right.
And at that point, she has made a small transfer fee, a med start fee. Maybe there's like a legal or medical clearance bonus. Like this is,
Right. For the
depending on
amount
how
of
the agency
time she
structures
has
it.
put in, though, at that point in time,
Yes,
it is a very, very small amount of money comparatively.
right. Exactly. So, I always like to take that sort of global view of what this is like before we dive into like the areas that cause friction.
Yep.
And because those are more, specific and technical and yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. And
Um,
generally, again, it's just down to clarity, right? Like the number of times like we think we're being really clear about things, and sometimes something comes up and we once again go, all right, how do we make this
yeah.
even clearer for the next time? And that's why lost wages, especially because they're structured so differently for so many different people. Like we
Mhm.
had a nurse who works overnights. And also sometimes your journey lasts longer than you think it's going to. So you can't know, like, hey, did you change jobs? Did you get an amazing promotion? We had one recently that she had unlimited PTO in her previous job, in her previous thing. So she had told the parents, don't even bother because you're not going to have to reimburse me because I have unlimited PTO. And
Yep.
unfortunately, their journey has lasted about 2.5, 3 years
Mhm.
altogether. And she's changed jobs. And
Yep.
now she's feeling amazingly upset and hurt because she has no lost wages provision in her contract because she was trying to be so kind, but not thinking through what could
Yep.
happen in a worst case scenario.
It's something I put into like drafting notes I send the attorneys is like, please provide a provision for increased wages
Mhm.
for a job that she may currently not hold. Like today, we had a meeting with a surrogate we're gearing up to match who's a stay-at-home parent. I'm like, okay, well, you might
Mhm.
go back to work.
You might
I
work
don't
part
know.
and you might decide to
Yeah.
do some
So we
number of
want to,
things. Exactly.
yeah. So we want to make sure that you're covered.
I will
Yeah.
say anybody can always say no to something. Like a gestational carrier can always choose to not put in for a reimbursement. She can
Right.
say, hey, you know what? The right thing, I think the right thing to do in this situation, because I didn't tell them I was going to get this new job or whatever it was, like, I'm not going to bother. She can make
Yep.
that choice, but then it becomes her choice as opposed to her feeling hurt that she didn't have the ability to make that choice.
Right. It shouldn't be something we just like forgot to plan for.
Right.
Yeah. But, the intended parents also want the ability to plan around things. They want some certainty in a very uncertain
Absolutely.
process. And so, I think it's okay within the parameters of this to, um, maybe create like, okay, well, if she gets a promotion and it like her salary literally doubles overnight, like maybe there is some sort of limit set to like how wages can increase mid journey because the intended parents are budgeting. And if something, right? So like there, I guess, can be exceptions to the general rule that a surrogate absolutely needs to be made whole. And that's the overall philosophy.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and I mean, there's so many situations that nobody can ever anticipate. Welcome to, I know
Yes.
we all stay up at night thinking about them and trying to come up with every one of them, but
Yeah.
we just can't. And to that end, like, there's also the spouse's lost wages to think about too. It There are so many times where an assumption is made about how the spouse's work life works.
Mhm.
And it may not be true. It could be that actually the spouse works four tens and the medical screening appointment fell on a day that he had no choice. It's not like he could shift his
Yeah.
schedule
He has to
around.
take the entire day instead of, right.
Right. Or also his day is a 10-hour day
Yep.
as opposed to an 8-hour day, which is what the presumption generally is. And so,
Mhm.
you have to make sure, just be clear, like exactly this. I had one, there's a firefighter. It was a 24-hour shift. And so like if he missed any part of his shift, like that was it. It was 24 hours of lost wages for him. And so that one was a hard swallow for
Yeah.
parents, I will say. They was like, okay, like what can we do to make sure that this generally is not going to happen in this situation?
Sure, sure. And then there's people that, may have tipped work or that they're 1099 and sometimes they have so many jobs and so many hours and sometimes they don't and you're trying to average things out. Gets complicated. But I do think I feel like the elephant in the room is like, well, what is reasonable compensation for 2026? Like people are always sort of curious, like where are we, what, like if we're to put numbers to things, like what is compensation, what is the mainstream? Because I think one of the things to watch out for on both sides is, well, if the compensation is way out of the mainstream, is it because the agency is engaging in deceptive advertising practices? Is it because this is essentially the only way they will attract people and they are skimping on other protections that are maybe more important, like independent counsel and mental health support and life insurance and all of the other things? Like,
Right.
why is it that a first time surrogate is being offered six figures by that agency? So, I would
I,
love
I
to.
wish I could answer for you because it's
Mhm.
it's really hard to watch and swallow, right? Especially when I know you. I think you do some international, but like I only help domestic intended parents, and
Yeah.
it can be really hard on a budgeting front for them. And so to watch these numbers just keep climbing and climbing and climbing is tough.
Right.
So to that end, what's the answer to your own question? Like, what are you seeing in general as let's just start with the first time gestational carrier, right? Because there's so many
Yeah.
variables to this.
I think the broad middle, from what I see, and like we don't see everything, right? We just like keep our ear to the ground or nose to the grindstone or whatever the expression is to like try to remain in the know. It feels like the broad middle is like 50 to 70,000 in base compensation, assuming it's not an all in,
Yeah. And I'm
right?
seeing I'm seeing 50 to 60 generally, but yeah, I agree with you. 65, 70 is an outlier but still
Yeah.
not one that makes people go, oh,
Right.
like at this point in time, as opposed to, I've definitely talked to attorneys who have seen $100,000, at
Of
which
course.
point you go, oh, okay, that really does make you suck in a big breath of air. Like, why, why that amount of money?
Right, because as a percentage of the overall cost for intended parents, and I'm not even including clinical,
Mhm.
what they pay to the fertility clinic, but like agency fees are also going up,
Mhm.
and a surrogate's compensation is typically, at least base compensation is typically less than 50% of their total cost.
Yep. Yeah.
So, so yes, but it's not to say like just because that is increasing doesn't necessarily mean that that increase is wrong. Because again, it's not for us to define what is deserved,
Right.
and
And
there are many culprits in making this very expensive, and so,
Well, and I
um,
assume you do similar to us. Like we allow gestational carriers full autonomy to choose their base compensation. I feel
yes,
really strongly it is not my place to tell a woman what the
yep,
cost of that risk is to her. Like 100. I mean, I can tell her if she's asked for $100,000 in compensation that I probably am not going to be able to match her
Right.
because I don't have parents who can bear that budget. But I would never tell her that what she's asking for is not the right amount of money for her because she makes that assessment as to what that risk is.
Yep, we have exactly the same approach. We'll just say, this is a little bit above what, or this is a lot above what we see as typical. That's fine. You may have to wait a little bit longer. We may not be the agency for you, like, et cetera, et cetera. All of the caveats so that they can make their own best decision. But yeah, no, we also allow surrogates full autonomy. They're allowed to tweak other things too. It's just base
Yeah.
compensation tends to be the one that gets changed the most.
That's the one that I think
Yeah.
people get the big, and this is why I say like the what you deserve thing is that people
Mhm.
get really focused on that. And we had to start doing something, and I mean, I know this isn't about surrogate side of things, but when we were sending profiles to parents, there was always like front center, first her name, like what where she lives, how many pregnancies, what her compensation is. And I had a parent turn down a gestational carrier because they said her compensation is too high. And I said, but she's a stay-at-home parent, so she has no
Yep.
housing wages, has the best
Usable insurance.
insurance I've seen, like with the lowest maximum out of pocket. And I was like, so her overall costs are really good. They ended up matching with a carrier whose base compensation was lower, but who was employed and needed an ACA plan. So it ended up costing more money
Yep.
for them because they got really focused on that one number and forgot to think about all of the ancillary
Mhm.
things. Like, so now we actually sit down, we lay it out even as part of matching. Like, this is how much it probably will cost to match with this specific gestational carrier based around all of those things. But it's the same for gestational carriers, right? They get really hung on that number,
Yep.
that big number, and then they forget to think through like is the agency going to go to bat for me about how long is the maternity leave afterwards that they're telling parents that they should expect. I saw somebody this week who was getting 2 weeks after delivery.
Mm.
And I was like, and because that's what the agency presented as what was appropriate. So that's what made it into the legal agreement. How much are they saying childcare? Is childcare negotiable? Because that's another one I see a huge. Nobody expects to go on bed rest, right? Like
Right.
every gestational carrier is like, I had perfect, amazing pregnancies. It's gonna be totally fine. And then they go on bed rest and they go $250 a week for 24/7 care for my child is completely inadequate.
Right.
Even if they have a spouse and partner that can take care of child outside of their working hours are 40 hours, but they have to commute. Sometimes they have to have a mandatory hour of lunch. So we're actually talking about 50 or 60 hours of
Mhm.
childcare a week generally that they're just not like, it's not enough to make them whole, and they're not necessarily being realistic about it. And again, same thing. Intended parents don't want to have these huge amounts of money, things like that. But how do you balance that making yourself whole and advocating? Like, be clear with people. Like, this is what my actual childcare really looks like in my actual situation.
Right. I mean, I live in a particularly high cost area, but like a babysitter in this neck of the woods is like $30 an hour.
Mhm.
That is, the 250 would cover less than a day
Right.
of childcare. So
Right.
yes, yeah. I mean, I think it's not just those things. It's also life insurance, mental health support.
Yes.
The structures of independent escrow, independent counsel. So if an agency is coming out of the gate with a really high base compensation, um, is your experience overall, the transparency of what the information you receive about those intended parents, the thought that was put into matching you, the just structures of the program and their support when things maybe don't go as planned.
Mhm.
Is that really
And
worth the additional $20,000 in base compensation that you may receive if things
and
go well?
I think that's something that gestational carriers forget to ask agencies when they're onboarding is, how long are you with me? How long does your support last? Because not all programs are the same. Some of them basically get through confirmation of heartbeat, and then they go, okay,
Yeah.
you all are on your own.
Yeah.
You're done. We don't support anymore. Others, and I think you're similar, like we support all the way through birth, beyond. We're in contact with people all the way through escrow is closing, even oftentimes well beyond that. I mean, in a way more unofficial capacity, right? Because
Right.
when you spend that much time with
You
somebody,
developed a relationship. Yeah,
exactly.
it's weird to, go
But where
cold.
does that support? And so what happens if, if an agency says, hey, we stop supporting you at, 12, 14 weeks, and actually you're running into problems for bed rest right before delivery, or something just goes sideways at delivery and you're having trouble figuring out lost wages, who's there to advocate for you? Like, that's a big question that sometimes people forget to ask. Like, where is that support? How long does it last?
Right. Did your agency insist on fully funding in a true way the escrow account before you were pregnant? Like,
Right.
does the money for your very high base compensation exist in a place where it'll be dispersed to you? And this isn't to scare, like, as we always know, like, the vast, vast majority of journeys go very smoothly. This isn't a big issue, but
Mhm.
you don't want to be on the other side of the but, and then there's an ellipsis and stuck with an agency that when we talk about what surrogates deserve, they deserve true support. And that's beyond compensation, and compensation is a piece of it, but it's so much more.
Yeah. I was going to shout out your social media post today that you guys put up from the Super Bowl, that with you're like, we're just like the sugar canes in the
Mm-hmm.
at the Super
Yep,
Bowl
hiding in the
concert. Like, we're
bushes.
hiding in the bushes, we're in the background, like you won't even notice us if we do everything right.
Yeah, I feel like New York City is still celebrating Bad Bunny because of just the massive Puerto Rican population here and the shout outs, and so we're all
Yeah.
just living on a little high after the
I,
Super Bowl.
but that was a great like follow through on how surrogacy is and
Yeah.
how a great agency is.
Thank
I
you.
loved that. So
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, shout out to Kobe, our marketing manager.
excellent. She did amazing.
Yeah. Are there any questions? I feel like there are a number of surrogates I know of that are in this chat right now. Does anybody have any burning compensation questions? I don't think I saw any,
I
but
haven't seen any questions yet.
I see some of surrogates that delivered literally within the last week, which is incredible.
Wow, that's
You
amazing. So
should
they're
you should
living
not be
the.
spending your time watching this, but
But no,
glad you're
they're
here.
resting, they're relaxing. It's
It's
fine.
true.
It's
It's
totally
true.
fine.
That's
You know.
commitment. All right.
Do
I'm
you want
not.
my last thought on like one thing that people
Of
forget a lot
course I
is
do.
travel related items
Yeah, yeah.
and things like per diem.
Uh-huh.
uh, what does that mean? What does a day mean? Like,
Right.
you leave in the evening for travel, do you get a whole day of per diem? So, or like if you take a first flight home in the morning, do you get all
Mhm.
day of per diem? I'll say, like, we actually use the government services chart, like, so literally, which is amazing. This is
Ooh, I should
lovely.
look that up.
This is my military background. I'll send it to you afterwards, but yeah.
Yeah.
Military background, like they actually have per diem broken out. So they have a first day, last day, they have a partial day. So you can say, hey, like, and it also is based on the zip code where you're going to, because
Mhm.
costs are different in different places. So when people are like, I get $75. Well, if you're going to New York City, $75 is gonna be like, mm, not very far, right? um,
The fact that Dawn says she's fangirling,
I
this
know,
is
right? I was
praise from
super excited
Caesar.
that she was here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I live in New York. I know you can eat on that, but
But when
you
you're
might be
traveling as a
right.
tourist, because that's what you're doing, right? Is
Yes,
that you're having to eat out, you're having to go find like the
right.
it's not
And if
always convenient to go find the 99-cent pizza shop on the corner, right? Where your
right.
hotel is. So, and
And if you have to eat at the airport, God forbid, and like you get a
you have to
bad
buy a
sandwich
bottle
from
of
Chiba
water at the,
Express, right? Exactly. I was gonna
yeah,
say the food has gotten better than it used to be, but like airport food is marked up like it's nobody's business. It's like stadiums, anywhere where they have a captive audience,
that's
including.
correct. But yeah, somebody like just made the comment,
Yes.
exactly. The GSA schedule, that's exactly what we use to level the playing field, right? Is what it really comes down to, is to make sure. And also because sometimes your per diem may be based on if you have to travel for an appointment. Like, so like let's say you have to go over 100 miles because your appointment is, your MFM is far away or your specialist is far away. Like that can help account for those things too and make it so that there's a level playing field so the parents don't feel taken advantage of, right?
That's right.
That you're not getting $75 for the whole day because really, honestly, you're only gone for breakfast time, but you do deserve something because you are missing out on your opportunity to be home and things like that. So like it gives a good balance as to how to figure those things out.
Yep, exactly. And people just want clarity, right? So
That's exactly right.
if there's a set of rules and they know that the contract is being followed, then I feel like the grumbling is lessened, which, because we all agreed to this. We agreed to this with time and attorneys in our corner and, came to a mutually agreed set of rules for this journey.
And I know we're a minute over, but shout out for people selecting their own attorneys.
Yes.
Agencies should not be assigning attorneys. They can absolutely give a list and say, hey, here's who we've had great experience with, but they should never, ever, ever tell you on either side, intended parents or gestational carriers, who your attorney should be. They should be your advocate.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry. That was okay. We're a minute over, but I needed to get that shout in there too.
It's okay. Nobody really has us on a clock. Just our own, desire to not overstay our welcome in people's Instagram feeds. Thank you for this. Wait, I should tease the next one. I think our next topic is about telling your kid their origin story. So how do parents who welcome a child through donor conception, through gestational surrogacy, through both, how do you talk about that?
Hey, excellent.
And I get, honestly, we should extend it, I think, to surrogates explaining this to their children.
Mm-hmm.
How does everybody explain all of this to friends, family, and specifically little ones in our lives?
Excellent. I'm excited. So,
all right.
Amazing. All right. Well, I'll see everybody, you and everybody, in 2 weeks.
Sounds good. Bye.
All right. Bye.